Hey guys, I decided I wanted to do a video on journaling, and specifically journaling in relation to spirituality. Mostly because it seems to be something that is really emphasised across the board when it comes to any kind of really pagan or witchcraft or any of those kind of spiritualities. Journaling just seems to be really hammered home as something that you really have to do. And probably more in the YouTube community than in the blogging community, but I think it is a general trend across the community as a whole, on the online one anyway. I mean, that's the only way I have access to other pagans. But it's something that is quite interesting to me because I have quite mixed feelings about journaling. Not that I don't think it's a good thing, I definitely do, but my own experience with it has been a bit rocky, you could say. I have mentioned before that I basically journaled my way through my teenage years, from I think my last year in primary school when I was 11, and right the way basically through all of secondary school. I just journal constantly. I actually wish I could show you those journals because I have them all. Well, they're not even all together because it wasn't even just journals. I also journaled in copybooks in school. I journaled all over the place. I journaled all the time. I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I think in a way it was trying to place some meaning onto a very meaningless feeling existence. School was a bit of a weird kind of time for me. I didn't have a very good time of it up until I was about maybe 15, 16, things turned around for me a bit. But I can't say I enjoyed the experience very much. And I definitely coped by journaling and I was writing songs and poetry and stuff like that, and by doing that extensively. But then when I went to college I basically stopped completely, and then that kind of triggered a bit of an existential crisis of sorts where I was thinking, oh my god, why don't I journal anymore? This is really bad. And I was kind of unhappy about quite a lot of different things because I really wasn't creating as much anymore. I didn't really have the time, I suppose, and I was trying to figure out who I was. So the journaling kind of stopped. And my boyfriend kind of encouraged me, tried to get me to do it again. But the thing about journaling is that if it's not coming from you naturally, it can be very hard. It's a very hard thing to make yourself do, because if it doesn't seem like a priority, it's very hard to actually fit it into your day and to make time for it. And it just doesn't feel particularly meaningful. It feels a bit pointless if it's not really coming from heart level. If you're sitting down with a pen and paper every day and just writing down what happened to you or your thoughts, or it can feel a bit contrived. But I have gotten back to journaling now, but it's definitely not in the same way as when I was a teenager. I actually have, as far as I can make out, I have 4 different journals on the go. And this is because I have found that because I don't have the time or the energy to be constantly journaling anymore, I've kind of found ways to kind of break it into different chunks and sections, and I've got different strategies, I suppose, to get myself to actually put pen to paper at least a couple of times a week. I'll just quickly go through my my current journal. So this is my current tarot journal. It's quite slim, but I don't really write in my tarot journal that much. It's really only when I do readings for myself or stuff like that. I take notes in a document on my computer and stuff like that, but I don't really turn to this journal that much. So it's just writing. It's nothing very exciting. Then there's my daily journal. That's this one. This is quite a chunky thing, and I'll talk about that again in a second. This is my general journal. So this is just for journaling when it requires more space in my daily journal. It's not about tarot, or it's not a tarot reading anyway, or not specifically related to tarot. It's usually a kind of spiritual kind of journal for me. I like to write in it after doing rituals, but I don't always, but I'll get back to that. And then you're going to laugh at this one. This is my shadow work journal. So I think a lot of people, I actually don't know, because people don't, despite the fact that everyone in the community seems to talk about how important journaling is, particularly in relation to spirituality, people don't really talk about the the nitty-gritty of it very much, I find. And I don't actually tend to have a very good idea of what any of these people are actually doing when they're journaling. Do they just have one journal? Do they sit down with it religiously every day and do they write, 3 pages? Is it more sporadic? Is it just after ritual? And how and why are they getting this motivation to do all this writing? Maybe to some people it really just comes more naturally. Maybe that flow that I had in my teenage years just stays with them. But for me, it's never been that simple. And I've ended up with what I would consider to be a sort of journaling guilt. It definitely relates from the guilt that I had when I was in college. And like at that time in college, I wasn't remotely spiritual. I was in my most atheistic phase in my life. But that guilt has definitely been kind of exacerbated by how much that journaling, the importance of journaling, is really emphasised in the pagan community. So I've definitely had to get to grips with that and decide how important journaling is actually going to be to me, and more importantly, how I'm actually going to do it, what form it's actually going to take, and how much time I'm actually going to spend on it and that kind of thing. So I think I'll go through each of my journals and talk briefly about how I use it and how I find that I will best actually sit down and use it. Because I don't know if other people have the same problem, but I have all these journals. People tend to buy them for me. I don't know if I've ever bought any of these for myself, actually. People tend to buy them for me because they have it in their heads that I journal. They know I write a lot. And I'll start a new journal. I'll have a great plan. I'm going to do this. I'm going to write every day. And I write a couple of entries and then that's it. Then the rest of the journal just languishes around with, lots of empty paper in it. And actually, I'll start with my shadow work journal. I've had this since I was about 15 or 16, I think, something like that. Maybe a bit older. I think my mum bought it for me because she thought it was cute or funny or something. But when I started this shadow work journal, now there's all of 2 entries on shadow work in this. And the first one was in October, I think the 1st of October actually, of this year. But when I started this journal, when I started the shadow work in it, there were actually about 5 or 6 or 7 pages of other nonsense from random other stuff. There's like a daily plan from 2010 and something from 2000, maybe even further back. My first instinct was to rip all those pages out and start fresh, because that is what I do over and over with all these, especially spiral bound notebooks. They're so handy for doing that. The more annoying ones are the bound ones where you can't really rip the pages out without it looking messy. I never know what to do with them. Those are the ones that end up languishing the most for me because I can't just rip out the pages. But I was literally about to rip out those pages and throw them out, and then I just suddenly thought, oh God, what am I doing? This is something that maybe I need to think about, and think about my tendency to do that, my constant need for a fresh start, and then being unable to actually go forward with the project, see it through, and reach the end of the notebook. So I left the pages there. As much as they irritate me every time I open it, they just kind of remind me of an aspect of my shadow self that I really need to get to grips with. So as I said, there's literally 2 pages in there, and I'm not going to show you anything in the inside because it is shadow work, so it is very personal. But I did pick it up again last night and I wrote in it a bit more. So I think this is just going to be a very slow ongoing process for me, and I'm definitely not pushing it. When it comes to shadow work, I don't know, maybe if I had more time and space on my hands, that I would actually feel able to commit myself to doing shadow work intensively for a while, but it's not something I really have the headspace for right now. So whenever I feel the urge, or whenever I have the time and the headspace, it's more about headspace really, isn't it? Like just feeling like your mind is clear enough or calm enough, or just that you've got that room in there to do that kind of thing. So that's my shadow work journal. So that's, it's an ongoing process. My general journal, I've mentioned this one before and I've actually showed it to you before, because I was marvelling at the fact that I started it on the 12th of May 2012, and so far, I've gotten a little bit further I think than the last time I showed you. I've gotten through this much of it. So I'm more than halfway through. But I don't mind that anymore, especially now that I have a daily journal. I try to write in this every time I do a ritual, but sometimes I have to squeeze ritual in and I just don't really feel like I have the time afterwards to sit down. I mean, really, how long does it take to write even a couple of lines? So I really need to try and make myself do that again. But one of the main things I've found about getting myself to journal is kind of what I mentioned just there. If I feel like every time I sit down to journal I have to write 5 pages, I'm just not going to do it. And sometimes, you know, this is a dark moon ritual, and sometimes, you know, it really does turn into something quite lengthy. I've no idea if that was in frame or not, sorry. I've got a mirror behind the camera so I can kind of see what I'm at, so if I'm looking over there a lot, so that I can see if things are in frame or not. But generally speaking, if I decide I have decided that I'm gonna journal after every ritual, I just say to myself, right, it only has to be a few lines. Just a few lines, jot down anything important that I feel like should be mentioned about this, any important experiences, and that's it. And a lot of them are just 1 page. But to be honest, actually more than not, they are fairly lengthy. I went through a phase of journaling my meditation every day. That was when I was meditating every day, which the yoga has kind of taken over from that. But I would like to get back to that at some point. So I would suggest to anyone who's having difficulty getting themselves to sit down and actually journal their ritual experiences, just say to yourself, just a few lines, or even just literally a few words, keywords. What are the first words that come to mind afterwards? Is there just one little part of a meditation that you want to write down? One little part of, if you're doing spell work or anything like that? I don't do spell work. I don't work magic. It's not something that really works very well into my worldview, you could say. Not currently anyway. So that's not an issue for me. I don't have anything like a Book of Shadows. But actually I will show you. This was my very, very first, I called it my Book of Shadows at the time. It was my first spiritual journal. Well, it was my first spiritual journey as well. It was when I was, I believe, well, I can tell you, it was the 15th of September 2003, so I was 14. And this was, yeah, it was mostly lists really of things I wanted to learn more about, and then longer entries. But that's the only thing I ever had that I remotely considered to be a Book of Shadows. And as you can see, I mean, really it was just a tiny little spiral bound notebook. So yeah, I don't beat myself up about the fact that this journal is being very slowly filled up. It's not a problem for me. If I feel like there's something that needs to be ruminated on at length, then I will go to this journal and I will write about it. I do try to do that fairly regularly, and I might get into a habit of maybe deciding to do that at the beginning of every month, first day of every month, or the second day if I don't get round to it on the first, something like that. I was trying to do a tarot reading for myself on the first of every month as well. That's another thing that's kind of gone by the wayside, but I will definitely get back into that, probably on the 1st of December. Then there's my daily journal. This has been an absolute lifesaver for me. This is what got me back into journaling. And when I was in 6th year in school, so when I was 16, 17, or 17 actually, that Christmas, oh no, it must have been the previous Christmas when I was 16, my dad got me a Moleskine diary that had a page for every day. And I didn't religiously write it in it every day, but I actually ended up filling up quite a lot of it. I think I must have been waning with the journaling at that point, and I just really liked having a journal that had like a page set for every day. If I didn't write in it one day, I would go back and probably fill it up with poetry and stuff if I ran out of space another day. And I actually asked him to get me something similar for 2012, and this is what he got me. Basically this diary, this daily diary, is just a daily planner, but it has, like I said, a whole page. Well, it has a whole page for every day during the week, and then at the weekend it just has half a page. And it might seem, that might seem a bit constrictive, or that you might kind of run out of space, and I do sometimes kind of run out of space, but generally speaking, if I feel like I'm going to have to talk about something or write about something at length, I'll go to my general journal. But the fact that there is only a small amount of space for every day actually means that I go and write in this journal a lot more. And I think I mentioned in another video that if I don't get to my journal and write in it on the actual day, I will go back once I actually do get to writing in it, I will go back and fill in the other days to the best of my recollection. I find that this just makes me feel a lot more satisfied about keeping it, and I don't feel like I'm cheating when I do this or anything. It just feels like I'm actually keeping my word better, and there's actually a bit of a point to what I'm doing. I didn't necessarily have a particular reason for wanting to write, to have a record of every single day. But it's kind of what it's kind of turned into is a good way for myself to kind of have a record of where I'm at emotionally and how that's changing, my ups and downs, and then I can, if I want to, go back and try and ascertain what certain spiritual practices, how they've been influencing my life and things like that. I can do so. Sometimes I'm not sure if it's entirely healthy to be able to do that, because you know the way, if you're trying to frame a particular story in your mind, you know, if you're saying to yourself, oh, this friend always makes me unhappy, or I'm not happy in my relationship, or my relationship is just fine, see, I can go back and read these entries and see that yes, I was pissed off with this person at this day, and you know what I mean, like sometimes I'm not sure that for somebody like myself who does way too much thinking about things, that I'm not altogether sure sometimes if it's a good thing that I actually have everything written down. But I don't do that too much, to be honest. I don't actually go back and read over old entries very much at all, hardly ever. It's just nice to know that it's there if I do feel like I want to go back and look over it. And more often than not, it's more that I want to remember when I started something, when I started this particular meditation practice, when I started yoga, things like that, that I can't necessarily off the top of my head remember, or when did I actually start that. And that gives me a better idea of, you know, how things are affecting my sleep patterns and stuff like that. Because I will usually write in my diary, I will write if I'm sick, how well I've slept, how badly I've slept, things like that. You know, it sounds very dry and boring, but these are the things that I find in a daily journal that are the important things for me to remember. What my emotion, what my mood was, if I was feeling upset and didn't know why, if I was feeling upset about something and did know why, all that kind of stuff. It's just handy to have a record of it, even if you don't really look back on it very much, if at all. And I find that having that small amount of space means that I will actually write in it. If I had a journal that had even a couple of pages per day, I think I would feel intimidated by it. I would feel like I had to fill it all up, and then I would feel like, well, I don't have time to fill it all up. Whereas, as you can see, sometimes I write very little for each individual day. And sometimes I will have to go back and fill in an entire week, but that's okay, then I do that. And I actually like having a very, very tiny space for the weekends, because the weekends, generally speaking, is the time when I don't get to write in it at all. And I will come back to it maybe Sunday evening and go, oh right, crap, I've got to fill all this in now, but then it's only, you know, a small amount of space. Because you know the way at the weekend, things are different. I'm going out at night, or I'm at my boyfriend's house, my parents' house, or whatever. And then finally, my tarot journal. I absolutely love the Four Queens videos about journaling in general. I'll talk about that again in a second, but she talks a bit about tarot journaling and creating a really beautiful kind of tarot journal. Like, she really puts a lot of work into hers, and puts in pictures and stuff like that. I think personally, if I tried to make myself do that again, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't touch it. It wouldn't happen. There would be 2 pages used, and then, you know, that'd be it. The rest of the journal would just sort of moulder away in a corner somewhere. So I just write. I just do entries, I date them, and what most of my journals so far have been writing about each individual card of the Shadowscapes deck. And I filled up one journal with readings and individual cards and stuff like that, and then I'm on to a second one. And yeah, that's what I do with that. I like these to be relatively small and portable. That's another thing, that I can carry them around with me, especially as I have 3 different houses that I sleep in during the week. So it's handy to be able to just, you know, shove it into your bag and bring it with you. But I would suggest that, I mean, compartmentalizing your journaling mightn't be for you. You might prefer to have just one big journal. But I definitely find, particularly with the daily journal, this is what got me journaling. Otherwise, if it wasn't for this, I don't think I would do any of this journaling at all, because I would feel guilty about it. I would feel like, oh, I don't journal enough, and then I would just not do it at all, because I have a very perverse logic when it comes to that kind of stuff. If I feel guilty about something, about not doing it, I just don't do it at all, ever, if I feel like I'm not doing it often enough. So I would suggest that for anyone who's having difficulty getting themselves to journal. Yeah, I mentioned that the Four Queens talks quite a lot about journaling. She talks about journaling for self-healing and for tarot and for quite a lot of different things. And I would definitely suggest that if you're interested in, you know, hearing what someone with a lot more experience has to say about journaling and that kind of thing, and automatic writing as well, things like that, I would say definitely check out her videos. She has some great advice when it comes to journaling, especially if you're the kind of person who just doesn't know how to begin at all, if you've never journaled at all, if you just find the whole thing to be a bit weird, or yeah, that you can't bring yourself to do it. Okay, this was supposed to be a quick video, so I'd better wrap it up there because I think it's gone on for quite a while, but I just wanted to go into detail about what I actually do and how I've made it work for me, because I feel like I can't be alone when it comes to people who, you know, find it difficult to actually make journaling into a daily part of their lives. And I do think it's very important for spirituality, particularly in things like paganism, where an awful lot of people they're going down a road where they're kind of making things up for themselves. They're drawing in a lot of different inspirations and a lot of different influences, and it's definitely good to be able to, you know, think about and ruminate on what you're doing, your practice, how it's working for you, and to be able to document your process as you go on, because it's not as simple as just, you know, following what's in a book or what a religious leader tells you to do. It takes a lot of introspection to really get going with a self-made spirituality. Okay guys, hope that was interesting.